In Palestine, the Israeli regime continues its genocidal siege on Gaza. Occupation troops killed 97 civilians in the last 24 hours. In the United States, the Supreme Court overturned a new law of the state of Texas that allowed the detention of migrants. In Peru, prosecutors opened a preliminary investigation against the president of the Council of Ministers, Alberto Otárola. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Palestine, 97 civilians were killed in the last 24 hours after Israeli shelling targeted homes in the cities of Gaza and Khan Yunis. Israel intensified its bombardment of different points in the Gaza Strip, which left families trapped under rubble of residential buildings. Israeli airstrikes killed 25 civilians in Khan Yunis, 17 of whom were killed in the shelling of the Al-Fakawi family house. At the same time, several citizens were wounded in an Israeli bombardment in Al-Rashid Street. During the last day, the occupation army fighter jets launched violent attacks on several areas in the north and south of the Gaza Strip. On the other hand, medical sources at the Shifa Medical Complex in Gaza City report the arrival of 9 dead. Several medical facilities throughout the territory were forced to close due to damage and lack of electricity. The World Health Organization warned about the death of infants from starvation in 2 hospitals in northern Gaza. The Director General of WHO, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, informed that the last visits to the hospital centers of Al-Awwal and Kamal Adwan indicate serious diagnosis due to malnutrition, dehydration, and lack of medical supplies. The authority highlighted that in the last 2 weeks alone, 15 children died due to lack of water and food. According to the United Nations, famine in Gaza has become almost inevitable due to the Israeli aggression against the Strip. 1 out of 6 children suffers from acute malnutrition, and it is estimated that 3% face the most severe form of wasting and require immediate treatment. The UN General Assembly met again on Monday to address the U.S. veto of a ceasefire in Gaza as humanitarian conditions point to catastrophe. The forum was tasked with addressing the situation in the besieged Strip and insisted on a cessation of hostility, a demand that seems impossible within the Council after 3 previous vetoes by the northern nation. The director of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, Philippe Lazzarini, attended the meeting. His participation came after Israel accused the agency of collaborating with Hamas and presented alleged evidence of the participation of 12 of its members in terrorist attacks on October. On February 20th, the United States vetoed the 3rd draft resolution presented for the cessation of the conflict, despite the fact that the proposal received 13 votes in favor and the sole abstention of the United Kingdom. On Monday, the Palestinian representative to the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, denounced Israeli pressure on Palestinian civilians to choose between displacement, subjugation, or murder.
For 5 months now, Israel has been committing atrocities against the Palestinian people, unchecked and unhinged, and the Security Council has been prevented repeatedly from calling for an immediate ceasefire to put an end to these atrocities. There is a reason why ethnic cleansing was possible in Palestine, why apartheid was possible in Palestine, why genocide was possible in Palestine. It is the certainty of the perpetrators that they will never be held accountable.
The Arab League called for urgent aid to be sent to Gaza and condemned those attempting to block this support. Secretary General Ahmed Abul-Gheit said at the organization's headquarters that the blocking of aid was passing a death sentence on the Palestinian people and was a form of collective punishment. Abul-Gheit made the comments during a meeting with Sigrid Kaag, the UN's Under-Secretary General and Senior Coordinator for Humanitarian Affairs and Reconstruction in Gaza. Hamal Rushdie, spokesperson for the Secretary General, said there was a dire humanitarian situation in Gaza and that Israel was responsible for blocking much-needed aid. Abu Ghaid and CAG called for an immediate ceasefire for the return of the Palestinian Authority to Gaza to support reconstruction efforts and coordination by the international community to deliver aid.
It is urgent and there is no time to wait. The international community is obligated to deal with the famine that has started, to ravage elders and children, as well as the lack of water and medicine that warns of the spread of epidemics amongst the Palestinian people, in order to save as much souls as we can and to reduce the pain of hunger, thirst, and eliminate the risk of deaths of people who are suffering from cold, rain, siege, and bullets with no solutions for them to survive or protect their families.
Houthi rebels fired missiles at a ship owned by an Israeli company on Monday as it sailed some 168 kilometers southeast of Aden, causing damage to its structure. The British Navy agency, UK Maritime Trade Operations, confirmed the incident in a brief statement published through its account on X and pointed out that the situation is being investigated. For its part, the British security company Ambrey also confirmed the attack and noted that the ship had been hit and had issued an alarm. According to Amber, the ship is operated by the Israeli company SIM Integrated Shipping Services. Since November 19th, Houthi forces have proclaimed a decision to attack Israeli-related ships in the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea in response to Israeli attacks on Gaza. On Monday in Chile, hundreds of demonstrators mobilized to protest against the administration of Benjamin Netanyahu and to demand the end of the genocide in the Gaza Strip. In this sense, Chileans gathered in front of the Israeli embassy in Santiago, the capital city, claiming the end of the conflict in the Gaza Strip and also demanding the government of Gabriel Boric to break all kinds of relationships with Tel Aviv. Since the beginning of the Israeli attacks against the Gazans, the people of Chile have expressed their solidarity with Palestinians and have asked for the support of their presidency, while Boric in November called for consultations with its ambassador to the occupied territories due to the continuous attacks of the Israeli regime in Gaza. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Those stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. On Monday, the Supreme Court of the United States suspended a new law of the state of Texas that allowed the detention of migrants. In this way, the U.S. Supreme Court's decision temporarily paralyzes the measure that allows the police to detain migrants who enter the country regularly. It should be noted that over the past few months, Republican Governor Greg Abbott has introduced a series of increasingly strict measures at the U.S.-Mexico border to limit the passage of Latin American migrants. At the same time, the Justice Department told the court that the new law would fundamentally alter the status quo that has existed in the immigration context for nearly 150 years, and argued that Texas policies would have significant and immediate adverse effects on relations between the two countries. On Monday, France became the first country in the world to protect the right to abortion. The National Parliament approved the incorporation of the right to abortion in the Constitution with a total of 780 votes in favor and 72 against of the 512 necessary votes. Precisely, the Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal, praised the achievement and pointed out that the government has a moral debt to those women who have suffered or even died for trying to be free. The act of registration in the Constitution will take place on March 8th, coinciding with the International Women's Day. The feminist activist Benedict Paoli, member of the Board of Family Planning, declared that this step can be considered as a turning point because it is the culmination of decades of feminist struggle.
In fact, this morning I was very moved. I was very moved and happy, joyful, but also very moved to have succeeded in enshrining abortion in the Constitution. That's how I feel. I still find it hard to believe, but it's true. It is important because it is the culmination of decades of feminist struggle. And just 2 years ago, we had no idea that it would be enshrined in the Constitution. In 2017, Lawrence Cohen, a senator, tabled a bill in the Senate, which was obviously not voted through. At the time, people thought we were crackpots for wanting to include abortion in the Constitution, and it just didn't seem possible. And now, here we are, in 2 years, a huge amount of work has been done, not only by members of parliament, but also by civil society.
Spain's Ministry of Labor and Economy reported the number of unemployed fell to 7,452 people during the month of February. The institution published a report showing that in each Spanish region unemployment decreased in 11 autonomous communities and increased in 6 others, among them Andalusia and Aragon. According to Social Security, an average of 103,621 affiliates were registered in February. The highest figure recorded last January, where hotels, restaurants, and education were the sectors that provided the most employment. However, despite this increase in employment, it remains difficult for young people to enter the labor market.
Well, I think that's really a very important fact to take into account, because in reality, it's been very hard for young people to find a job nowadays. We need more jobs that are really worth doing.
Well, I'm currently multi-employed, which is the opposite, but because the working conditions are awful. I have several colleagues who are out of work, and they are very prepared. It is awful.
In Russia, in the context of the scandal unleashed by the leak of a conversation between German and Ukrainian military personnel, the ambassador of Berlin in Moscow, Alexander Graf, was summoned. The Russian Foreign Ministry discussed with the German diplomat the recording confirmed as authentic. In this audio, the German airport force officers discussed a possible bombing of the Eastern Bridge in reference to the repeatedly hit Crimean Bridge in the middle of the conflict. The maneuver would be carried out with Taurus missiles, which would also be supplied to Kiev. They also admit that they have been involved with Ukraine for a long time, in addition to other statements that could be considered a declaration of war. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz promised that the leak of such sensitive information will be investigated thoroughly, intensively, and quickly.
As we now understand, they have not been fully denazified, and this is becoming more and more obvious these days. The most terrifying thing that this will lead to is a fact, and you can prove it. If nothing is done, if this process is not stopped by the German people, it will lead to dire consequences, first and foremost for Germany itself.
In China, the 14th National People's Assembly began its second session on Tuesday morning at the Great People's Palace in Beijing. Chinese Premier Li Qiang presented the report on the government's work at the meeting. Several Chinese leaders, such as President Xi Jinping, made an appearance together with 2,872 deputies of the Assembly. During the 7-day session, the deputies will analyze the report on the work proposal for the 2024 plan for the economic and social development of the country. The forum will also discuss the organic law of the Council of State, the work reports of the Standing Committee of the National People's Assembly, the Supreme Court, and the Supreme People's Procurator's Office. In South Korea, the government is threatening to take legal actions against thousands of junior doctors that have been on strike for weeks now. The second Deputy Health Minister, Park Min-soo, reported that this pressure action reaffirms the government's line that doctors should be held accountable for their actions. In this frame, the government has so far officially confirmed the suspension of the licenses of 7,000 medical staff members. Currently, about 9,000 medical residents and interns in the country have been absent from their workplaces for 2 weeks in protest against a government plan to enroll 2,000 more students in the country's medical schools for the next few years, a plan that, according to the striking doctors, could affect the quality of healthcare. We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. In Peru, prosecutors opened a preliminary investigation against the president of the Council of Ministers, Alberto Otárola, due to an audio leak that was pointing at wrongful hiring in the public domain. The illicit enrichment and constitutional complaints investigation area initiated the inquiry of the Council of Ministers president for alleged irregular hiring of Yacide Pinedo, with whom Otárola had a sentimental relationship. Otárola insists on his innocence, promising explanations upon his return. He stresses understanding the political implications, yet denies any wrongdoing or theft. In this matter, the Peruvian de facto president, Dina Boluarte, ordered Otárola to return from a conference that he was attending in Canada as soon as possible to answer to the justice system. In Uruguay, workers from the Ministry of Social Development carried out a national strike to symbolically dismiss Minister Martin Lema, who is considered responsible for the serious consequences of his administration for the life of Uruguayans. The activity took place outside the central building of the Ministry of Social Development, where the workers denounced the budget cuts, wage reductions, and the precariousness of the programs during the administration of Minister Lema. The mobilized people hold him responsible for the record number of homeless people, which has doubled in the last 2 years. They also blame him for the increase in poverty, among other situations suffered by the Uruguayan population.
We're mobilizing together with Sutiga, which is the Union of Outsourced Workers of BIDES. Well, we are saying goodbye to a minister who is living with many more shadows than lights. Unfortunately, he's not a minister who has gone unnoticed during these 4 years in office. In fact, he's living with a record number of homeless people, with a withdrawal of social policies from the territory, with a 30% reduction in the salary of more than 300 BIDES workers in a process of deregulation that this union fought for, and well, we understand that it was a regrettable management that leaves terrible social results for the country.
In principle, he has been a minister who has always acted with his back to his workers. He never sat down at the table with us, and in fact, this was reflected last year when an unprecedented salary reduction of 370 people was implemented in this ministry. We also want to denounce the social policy that we understand have been dismantled. BIDES has a particularity of being a ministry that increased its budget, and nevertheless, the turn towards welfare policies has been very strong, while other policies that are not welfare policies have been weakened.
In Argentina, journalists have gathered at the headquarters of the state news agency TELAM to protest its overnight closure. Only 3 days after President Javier Milei announced the closure of the news agency, staff found the building fenced off and the website disabled. Moreover, all the workers were relieved of their duties for a period of 7 days. In this context, journalist organizations gathered in front of the agency's offices in Buenos Aires for a solidarity hug to resist the measure, which they deemed unconstitutional as it bypassed Congress. TELAM has over 700 workers and is a key provider of national news, both through local and international news outlets. Demonstrators have denounced the government act as an attack on the press and its freedom of speech.
From CIPREVA, from the Press Workers Union of Buenos Aires, we denounce that the police are fencing off TELAM. We, its representatives, the delegates, the internal commission of the union, are here to defend this media that has more than 78 years of history, where the workers come every day to work. It seems to us that this is an attack on democracy and freedom of speech, and that is why we are going to defend it. TELAM defends itself.
The President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, and the extended political high command of the national government held a meeting on Monday to work on the 7 transformations plan. The meeting took place at the Simón Bolívar Monumental Stadium. During his speech at the event, the head of state asserted that the path is being paved together with the people, whose proposals will make up the plan of the 70s towards 2030, a plan to direct and lead the future times of Venezuela. The president also reiterated that all Venezuelan people have the obligation to be a power of transformation and not a power of conservation.
I have been checking, and I really think that these 70s represent a new boom for our revolution. The ideas involved, the proposals to action, are totally relevant to the current reality of Venezuela. They are totally viable, they are totally necessary, and the proposals that the people have made are going to make up the plan of the 70s towards 2030, a plan to govern, to deal with the future of Venezuela, to build its future.
This Tuesday, Venezuelans and citizens around the world remember Commander Hugo Chávez's legacy 11 years after his physical departure. The date will be remembered in Venezuela with different political and cultural activities. The commemorations will have as its center the mausoleum where his remains rest in the mountain barracks, where from early hours the people and the youth of the United Socialist Party will pay eternal tribute to their everlasting guide. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro said in his X account that Chávez is still present in every struggle, in every action, and in the heart of each Venezuelan that loves the homeland. The United Socialist Party will also carry out this Tuesday a great demonstration called Red Carnations that will start from different points of the capital and will gather at the Cuartel de la Montaña. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Telegram and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Otárola. Thanks for watching.